of Turkey, captured the imagination of millions of people. The Syrian conflict and the subsequent European refugee crisis have dominated not only the news headlines, but also discussions among artists and intellectuals around the world. Due to the significance of these recent events, the College of Visual and Performing Arts at the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth has dedicated an exhibition to the topic of the refugee crisis. Of astonishing staged photographs in the remote deserts of the Middle East, the Tehran-based artist Gohar Dashti envisions the plight of homelessness for the millions of people who have recently fled such war zones. Known for his ironic and surreal trompe-l'oeil murals in Tehran, London, and Boston, through a series of intricate prints, artist Mehdi Gadianlu displays the difficulties of displacement by portraying crowds of people trapped in uncertain situations. Meanwhile, California-based artist Pantia Karimi showcases a multimedia installation of abstracted medieval maps of major Middle Eastern ports, alluding to a glorious bygone era during which migration of people from and to the Middle East contributed to the advancement of knowledge and commerce. Lastly, through a series of threads interrupted by objects and images which captured the precarious lives of stateless people, the South Coast-based site-specific artist Jody Stevens follows the grim patterns of migration from the Middle East to Europe. In its entirety, the exhibition hopes to inspire the viewer to reflect on the struggles endured in the displacement of migrants. This work that you can see behind me is the work of local artist Jody Stevens. This is actually a site-specific work of art. Jody, thank you very much for creating this beautiful piece for us. I tried to help her, but it was so labor-intensive that I couldn't continue after half an hour. So these are threads. I call it the crying map because these show the patterns of migration of Syrians and North African refugees coming to European countries.
When Pamela asked me to be in the exhibition, I was honored, but also I wasn't sure what I would build because I don't, I build a lot of site-specific installation, but it's not normally charged in this way. And so we talked a bit about maybe putting some threads throughout the space, and then I was thinking about my experience as an American and how I perceive this situation, perceive this crisis, and really it's things that I see on a computer screen or a news headline. They're blips of words or images, and our days are interrupted only by a short, it's a short few seconds, and we can choose to ignore it. It's kind of nice having a map because you realize that these countries aren't so far. They're not so far from Europe. And as Pamela was saying, she was helping me a little bit, and she said, it's kind of a nice metaphor because as I was working, she said, the closer you get to Europe, the more difficult it gets because the size of the countries are, sort of tedious and the lines are tedious, but, and it's a metaphor for these people's experience. And
thanks to Pamela to curate this exhibition, and also a special thanks to Elmar and Azita. They are here and they help us and for loading the work and from their collection, and I'm really happy they attend to the opening because I know they have a really busy schedule. Thank you so much. And if I want to talk briefly about the Stateless series, I think the name of the series talk about itself, the Stateless. It's, when you're thinking about the stateless, maybe you remember about the home. Where is the home? And when you're just remembering something about the home, maybe it's a little house, or it's the places every day you walk, or it's a person, father, mother, or some people that are relevant to you. But I think it's a sign, it's a things, it's a smell. It's something maybe you can feel it. When I wanted to do a project, because the Stateless series was inspired from recent refugees crisis in the Middle East, and I wanted to do a project about that. And just thinking when they want to think about the future, or when they want to think about the past, what they remember, where is the home? And just they don't have any past, they don't have any future, and they are lost, they living in a lost city. And yeah, when you don't have a root, how you can rise it again? And who will open the arms for them? It was a concept for the Stateless series.
Gohar, could you please talk to us a little bit about how you staged this one photograph? What was the process, and how did you make a decision about capturing this beautiful composition?
About this specific work, the palm in this area is a symbol of life, but this palm doesn't have a root. They want to take life, but they don't know where can I put it again and rise it again. And that if you're asking technically how is the process, my process is exactly like a filmmaking. I have a model, find the location and set everything and take one picture in one day.
Gohar, I want you to please talk to us a little bit about this photograph. What time of the day did you exactly capture this photograph? And what was the concept behind the couple hugging each other with their belongings?
I took this picture at 5 a.m. and usually I working in this series early in the morning or in the afternoon because the light was really important. I didn't want it to have a contrast, so I have to care about the light exactly in the location. And I set and I put everything, in the midnight, and I took the picture at the 5, in the morning.
Wow.
Yeah. And the concept, I think, is the photo is talking about itself. You can see, like immigrant people, but who will open the arms for them, how they can settle again. It's like, it could be everywhere now. Yeah.
questions about the goal of this exhibition. So what's the point of this exhibition? Why are we doing this, and what's the purpose of it? Are we making a political statement, or are we providing some support for the people who are going through the devastating practice of migration from the Middle East and North Africa to European countries, and also the crisis that has resulted from these migrations in Europe? So another source of inspiration for this exhibition and this event was Artists in Times of War and Other Essays by Howard Zinn, cultural critic and historian, in which he writes, what most of us must be involved in, whether we teach or write, make films, play music, or act, has to not only make people feel good and inspired, but also has to educate a new generation to do this very modest thing: change the world. We have a video installation there in that small room, and it represents bodies of water in and around the Middle East, including, for example, the Mediterranean, the Bosphorus, the Caspian Sea. And these shapes and forms, these abstract shapes that you can see here, they're actually inspired by medieval maps of these bodies of water from the 11th and the 10th century. These maps were drawn by Arab and Persian cartographers. And so the contemporary water is projected onto these medieval maps, reminding us of the time of crisis now, but also of a more glorious time back in the Middle Ages, where exchanges of knowledge, commerce, and information took place between the Middle East and European countries. Now, a little bit of context about this kind of art, the kind of art that tries to sympathize, a kind of art that tries to understand the pain of other people, and the kind of art that tries to understand the difficulties of our world. In the context of the United States, as you know, in the 1960s and 70s, the American left enjoyed a coverage and attention in the mainstream media with its extensive support of civil rights, its dissent against the war in Vietnam, and its energetic countercultural movements. In the 1980s and 90s, the left gained a foothold in the expansion and the institutionalization of racial, gender, and sexual emancipation movements. So in the 1980s and 90s, we also see a shift in institutions of art and museums of art. And that means that for the first time, these institutions are providing support, most importantly financial support, for these activist artists. These artists are now publicly funded, and their works were shown in both conventional and alternative exhibition venues across the United States as well as in Western Europe. Now, what about artists who don't deal with their own pains, with their own problems and issues, but deal with the pain of others? Let's take a look at Susan Sontag's regarding the pain of others. In it, she writes, "Compassion is an unstable emotion. It needs to be translated into action or it withers. The question of what to do with the feelings that have been aroused, the knowledge that has been communicated. If one feels that there is nothing we can do, but who is that we? And nothing they can do either, and who are they? Then one starts to get bored, cynical, and apathetic." Artists from around the world have responded to some of the difficult issues of our time, which is right now the crisis in the Middle East. One of the most famous artists who has engaged in this discussion is Ai Weiwei, the famous Chinese artist who created this amazing exhibition in this beautiful pool in front of the Belvedere Museum, formerly a Baroque palace, as you might know, in Vienna, in Austria. And the work is titled F. Lotus, and the installation features 201 rings, each with 5 life jackets worn by the Syrian refugees and arranged into the shape of the letter F. And those of you who know Ai Weiwei, you probably know what he means by F. A lot of people actually criticized him for making art about the refugees, so he's basically providing a response to those people who criticized him. And this is Ai Weiwei. And so here are more details of this project that is created entirely by these life jackets that Ai Weiwei himself found on the island of Lesbos in Greece. The director of the Belvedere wrote about it, quote, "The life vests draw attention to the uncertain fate of the refugees who wore them. The lotus flower symbolizes purity and longevity. And the F is reoccurring and provocative motif in Ai Weiwei's oeuvre." After that, the exhibition was taken to Berlin. Konzerthaus concert hall was covered entirely by these life jackets. One German journalist wrote about it. He said, why is he doing this? You know, he should send these life jackets to people in Africa, to the people who are actually in need of them, but they can't afford to buy them. Well, you know, this is art, and art can be very powerful. Art can bring consciousness to the society. Art can inspire people, not just intellectually, but also emotionally. So I find it important, despite all the criticism that it has received. It's also beautiful. It allows us to have a new appreciation for this style of architecture. Another very important event that was dedicated to the situation of the refugees is an exhibition organized by the Associate Curator of Architecture at MoMA, whose name is Sean Anderson, and it's called Insecurities, Tracing Displacement and Shelter. And to explain the goal of the exhibition, it says the exhibition ties together various projects by a wide spectrum of artists, architects, and designers, focus on documenting the lives of the nearly 67 million displaced people. 67 million. And trying to create solutions to the problems they face. Insecurities challenges our understanding of the global refugee emergency and asks viewers to think critically about what it means to be a citizen in the world today. And the exhibition included everything, ranging from these beautiful large-scale photographs of refugee camps from around the world to the actual tent or shelter that is used for the refugees, including the Syrian refugees, and is produced actually, of all companies, by IKEA. Now, how do artists from the Middle East responded to the situation? Artists artists from the Middle East, whether inside the Middle East or outside of the Middle East, have been extremely sensitive to the things that have been happening in the Middle East since 2011. And also the rise of ISIS has impacted a lot of artists. This artist, Morashina Layari, for example, a couple of years ago, she created all the objects and the materials, historic and ancient precious materials that were destroyed by ISIS in 3D form. She 3D printed all of them. And in the body of each one of these objects, there is a flash drive or a memory card that includes all the archival information, all the museum information in all different languages, Arabic, English, and whatnot, so that the future generation of people, if they don't have access to the real object, at least they can have access to this memory card that includes all the information, all the history of that object that was documented by a lot of archaeologists and historians throughout different decades. These elegant prints are by Mehdi Ghadianlou, another artist from Iran. Recently he completed a gigantic mural on the Rose Kennedy Greenway. Those of you who read his biography probably noticed that he reflects on his own life and his own childhood experience in Iran during the 1980s and during the Iran-Iraq War. The Iran-Iraq War happened from September of 1980 and lasted for 8 years. And you know, the city of Tehran, the capital, where Mehdi comes from, was attacked, obviously, by Saddam Hussein's bombs and missiles many, many times. So in this painting that he showcased in London last year, he's actually reflecting on that kind of experience. What does it mean to play on the street as a child in the Middle East and have this fear of something heavy and abstract might actually drop on you and kill you? So this fear, this tension, this anxiety is part of his work. But Mehdi did also something very, very interesting, which is the exact opposite of what you see in the gallery, because those prints are extremely small. Mehdi was very sensitive to the political propaganda images that decorated the walls of the city during the 1980s predominantly. And these images are images of the Ayatollahs in larger-than-life guys, and they're propaganda images, obviously. In response to that, Mehdi, in early 2000s, he decided to create artistic walls. So while these murals are devoid of any kind of political message, political propaganda, or even statements, I see them as a very subtle kind of political intervention on behalf of the artist, meaning that the artist is responding to what's happening around him, and he's proving that artists can actually change the world. And here they are, the beautiful images that he has created on the walls of Tehran, and they're absolutely amazing. He leaves it to the interpretation of the viewer. Some of them are a little uncertain. You don't know what to do with them. Some of them are the extension of the facades of the buildings. And by doing that, he's actually responding to the architecture and the environment in which he is working in. More images of Mehdi's beautiful murals all over the city of Tehran. This is a detailed image. Now, the Boston Rose Kennedy Greenway noticed these beautiful murals in Tehran, so they decided to invite Mehdi to come to the city of Boston to animate this wall that is located right outside of the South Station. And this is the final result. And this is Mehdi sitting in front of his mural. And he told me that he was very upset about what happened in Boston in 2013 during the marathon bombing. And he wanted to give a gift to the people of Boston. And this gift comes straight from Iran, and I think that's a beautiful gift. Thank you so much, everybody. This has been a huge honor for me to be able to curate this show.